Part 4 is also devoted to Team Phase 2, and it's about conducting effective meetings. Now we're talking about how to conduct a meeting using the high-performance team format. We're going to show it here, as mentioned, with full features, which can be modified for Six Sigma or other needs. It's the structure that helps us maximize results and minimize distractions. So it's easier to lead effective meetings, and evidence indicates that the model produces stronger teams. Let's use a sample 2-hour meeting to demonstrate what the high-performance team meeting format is like. We start off the beginning of the meeting with good news reports. So for about 5 minutes, go around the room and share something that was positive, that was seen, heard, or done, or pay some compliments. This really helps get the meeting started off on the right foot. And for people that are really anxious to getting down to business, give this a chance and you'll find that it really is a nice way to start off the meeting. It really helps. Then go into measures and problem solving. You should be able to determine 5 to 7 key measures to track to identify how your critical processes are doing, whether you're talking about a specific project, a process, a department. You should be able to identify the items that will tell you whether or not you're in trouble or not. So it's kind of like a dashboard. And some of you might be familiar with the balanced scorecard. This isn't too much different than that concept. I worked with a company one time to convert their strategic plan into 5 to 7 key measures. They ended up with 14 measures, but those were the measures they used at the beginning of their meetings following this format. If you find during the exploration of the measures that there's a problem, it can be turned into an agenda item for a future meeting. It can go in the parking lot, but it gets dealt with so that people are confident that things are under control. Next, we cover the action items for about 20 to 30 minutes or whatever time on your agenda is appropriate. These are the items that were agreed upon at the last meeting by the members present. These action items were assigned, and then in between meetings they were worked on, and working with the leader for the current meeting, the agenda was put together and distributed ahead of time to show which items were going to be reported on. Next are the new agenda items. These are items that came up between meetings, or some kind of an emergency or issue that might have come up that was brought to the attention of the leader. These items were added to the agenda between meetings, and somebody is going to give a report, and when they're preparing to give their report, they contact the leader and tell them how much time they're going to take and what the priority is of the action item. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So the leader then puts together an agenda of the new items as appropriate. Let me point out that during the discussion of the measures, during the action item reports, and during the new items reports, the new business reports, items that have come up that are tangents to what you were talking about or seem to be potential items for action items go on to the board for the parking lot, and that's so that you can stay on track and not be distracted for very long. The parking lot items will be taken care of later. After going through those large chunks of time on the agenda, starting to wind down the meeting with a few minutes of information sharing, this is where you go around the room and you bring people up to date on information of any kind that would be of interest to the team members. It could be anything from trips and jury duty that's coming up, training opportunities, visitors that are going to be coming in. This is an information-only session. But what I found was that this is very helpful because sometimes somebody will give some information that will really trigger some important response or action by somebody else because the information was critical to something they were thinking about but it hadn't been expressed yet. Next, spend some time deciding on what the agenda items will be for the next meeting and tentatively who's going to work on them. So this comes from the action items that weren't resolved, the new items that seem to be of interest to the group for pursuing, and items from the parking lot. Work will be done on these later on, but it only takes a few minutes to decide who's going to do what at this point. Next, the evaluator spends some time analyzing the meeting, talking about how each person did with their role, what worked and what didn't work, were there reports that were not very well thought out, compliment people for a good job they did, if they did a really good job on an action item report. If somebody was inappropriate in how they talked to somebody, bring that up. But this is an honest evaluation, and if the task rotates around from meeting to meeting, it's really a good experience for people to learn how to do this. Also, people start to think twice about what they're going to do if they know it's going to be evaluated. Now, this takes a little bit of trust among team members if you're going to do something like this, but I think that's one of the byproducts of this process. The first time that I was ever in one of these high-performance team meetings, and I saw how they were handling things, and I saw the parking lot being used, I saw the timekeeper keeping people on time, and then when I heard the evaluator, I was really blown away. But the next thing that happened was one of the biggest surprises of all. At the end of the meeting, the team evaluated themselves and gave themselves a score using a rubric between 1 and 10, 10 being best. They discussed what they thought were strengths and weaknesses of their meeting, and then they took the number that they got, that they gave themselves, and they plotted it on a chart. They were plotting themselves on a chart and using statistical process control to monitor their team meeting progress. They also were in a system with the high-performance team model where the parent company had training for teams, and they had 5 levels of training. It kind of reminds me of the CMMI levels for software proficiency. But anyway, a team would start out with level 1 training. Those were basic teamwork tools. And then after they got proficient at those, were getting scores of 8 and 9 on their evaluations at the end of meetings, then they could request level 2 training. Those were more advanced tools. And then after they got proficient with those, they could ask for level 3 training and then just keep working themselves up the chain. So it was a well-structured, well-thought-out, high-performance program. Let me finish this part by showing you a form that can be used as both an agenda and as a set of minutes, and also as a historical document for the meeting. This form shows on the left the different points of the agenda and how much time is devoted to each one, what the starting time is. Then the agenda item is shown, and it follows the high-performance team format. And what it's showing there is the actual agenda items bolded, and agenda items from previous meetings are still shown, but they're in unbolded fonts. And then you just scroll items off the top of the block, and I always keep these to 1 page, although there was a time when I let these things grow and I've gotten up to quite a few pages. But you don't really need to keep that much historical information if you can always just look at an old agenda item. But it shows what the agenda item is and the initials of the person that it's assigned to. So you know the time, the item, and the person that's assigned to. Then on the right is where you document things that were said at previous meetings during the discussions for historical purposes and also for some accountability. And what I usually do is highlight in yellow using the yellow highlighter feature in Word items that are the freshest so that people can see right away what was at the last meeting. One of the great things about this particular format is with Word you can create a new agenda in a fraction of the time that you would have if you were creating an agenda from scratch. So all you have to do is scroll the old item up and off, perhaps, put the new item in, make sure the time is correct, and then on the right you add information from the last meeting about important comments or commitments or action items, and maybe scroll some old things off. And this can be put together rather quickly and distributed by email. And my experience with this has been that if you get it out at the same time every week or every 2 weeks, so people know when to expect it in their email, that they come to look for it because they want to make sure they're prepared and they don't want to miss any of their responsibilities. So I find this to be an easy tracking tool, good accountability, good documentation, and it really does help the whole team feel like they're doing something important. So anyway, I hope that this high performance team meeting format had some things in here that you'd find beneficial. Let me just say that sometimes when you hear about a new technique or a new idea, it doesn't sound that great. It sounds okay. But when you finally try it yourself, you find out what the real magic is and how great it really is. I know that's the way it was the first time I heard about quality function deployment, QFD. I thought, wow, that doesn't look like too much fun. But after going through a QFD project myself, seeing the results and how I felt about the work we had done, I became a real big believer in QFD and was very anxious to use it when other opportunities arose. I say that because perhaps this might be something where you feel the same way. I suggest you give it a try, play around with it, and I believe that you'll find that it can really help get rid of some of those dysfunctions of a team because of the structure and the organization.